worldwide fuel scarcity. Earlier this week, NUPENG accused the Dangote Refinery of breaching an agreement that guaranteed workers the right to unionize. The union alleged that drivers were being coerced into abandoning NUPENG membership in favor of a management-backed group, the Direct Trucking Company Drivers Association. Dangote Refinery has denied the allegations, insisting that union membership remains voluntary. Now, with multiple interventions by the Department of State Services and the Federal Ministry of Labor and Employment, questions remain. Is this about workers' rights or about control of Nigeria's strategic downstream market? Does the Dangote Refinery's move to deploy CNG trucks, 10,000 of them, represent an energy transition milestone or an attempt to edge out independent truck drivers? And ultimately, what does this face-off mean for the Nigerian economy, fuel security, and industrial relations? As always, we invite you to be part of the conversation. You can call us on 0700 1051 1051. You can send us WhatsApp messages on 0909 916 4403. And you can also join us via social media at City 1051. Now, joining us today to unpack these issues is a man whose expertise covers economics, trade policy, and development strategy, Professor Ken Ife. Professor Ife is one of the directors of Dovel Global Consulting and an accomplished development consultant and economist. He has held advisory in the UK, including as a London Enterprise Ambassador and Director at the HM Home Office CDF, the London Food Board, and the Government's Link for London, working under Prime Ministers Tony Blair and Gordon Brown and Mayor Ken Livingstone. Internationally, he has served as the UK government DFID trade advisor to Nigeria. And since January 2023, he has been a member of the Presidential Governing Council of the Ministry of Finance Incorporated, MUFI. Currently, he is driving public-private partnership concessions in Nigeria's cassava, bioethanol, methanol, and biomethanol value chains, while also serving as lead consultant to the ECOWAS Commission on Industry and Private Sector Development. He is also president of the Institute of Professional Economics and Policy Managers, Nigeria, and a visiting professor at several universities, including the Nigerian Defense Academy. It is my pleasure to welcome Professor Ken Ife to City Talks with REUBEN ABATI. Professor Ife, thank you very much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you. Well, let's begin with the immediate issue. What's your reaction to the dispute between Dangote Refinery and NUPENG? Do you see this primarily as a labor relations issue or as a larger economic struggle over control of Nigeria's oil and gas logistics chain?
I think the latter is what I think is the issue. Look, REUBEN, in 1981 and 1982, when I did my PhD in the UK, in Leeds precisely, it was a baptism of fire because I witnessed the fight between Mrs. Thatcher and Atos Cargill of the Miners' Union. And she eventually prevailed because it was about the flagrant abuse of union monopolistic power. And I think we have to know, because it has a major economic dimension, development dimension, because you end up driving down that industry into extinction. And then in America, when it happened to the motor industry, they drove the motor industries to China, and in the UK, they drove. So it is what is going to happen. And I think we have to look at, is this a proxy war being fought for oil majors? Is it a proxy war being fought for oil marketers? Is it really just about unionism? because I've looked at this. I haven't intervened in this case because I needed to understand where everybody was coming from. And it has become increasingly clear to me that it is about destroying the remaining economy that we are trying to salvage in the oil and gas supply chain. And I think we need to probe this further. And one advice is this: people who live in glass houses don't throw stones. And that's one big advice that I'm going to give to NUPENG. You don't throw stones when you live in glass houses.
Prof, you talked about unions' monopolistic chain. And that's precisely what NUPENG, supported by the oil marketers, are complaining about. They say what Dangote Refinery was to do is to monopolize the downstream sector by deploying 10,000 CNG power trucks to do direct delivery to the end users. But the Dangote Refinery is saying, no, that's to increase efficiency, and it is also to make things easier for the average consumer. But NUPENG says, no, this is an attempt to push them out of the market. And meanwhile, they too have wives, they have children, they have responsibilities. But now you say it's NUPENG that is looking for monopoly.
No. It is no. If they have any monopoly, there are two monopolies in Nigeria. Monopoly number one is NNPC. And we have lived with this from 1969 to today, taking various forms, even with the PIA, pushing them out into a private company. They still continue monopoly power of exclusive export of the crude and exclusive import, and then ended up giving Nigeria 500 billion naira every month as subsidy. And even as the new president stopped the subsidy, he could only lay hands on 50% of that. That's what World Bank says. And then NNPC still destroyed that remaining 50% in their inefficient operation. If you're talking about monopoly, that's monopoly number one. And monopoly number two is what NUPENG is rallying its head to do. It wants to destroy the competitiveness of industry, destroy investment. No company can, no nation can develop without investment. It is investment first, then investment in productive capacity. That productive capacity creates employment. The employment creates disposable income and welfare of people, and then they're able to pay for their education, health, and poverty reduction. That is the cycle of investment. But that's what you see is that the country was running short of investment in the supply chain, in the fuel, the distribution, storage, and the asymmetries and the inefficiencies in the whole of that supply chain. And so somebody brings $20 billion to invest in refineries, not even worrying about downstream. He stayed at midstream, but was concerned about the hemorrhage in the supply chain and decided to invest 1.7 trillion naira investment without a tangible return there, but to invest it to ensure that the product can deliver to every part of the country. And there are two questions you are going to ask on this. One, before you do a national program, we will always ask you, from my experience in international development, where have you piloted this? December last year, this company spent over 10 billion naira to maintain the price of fuel across the country. And that was successful because it reduced inflation, it reduced the queue, it maintained the price, and then that was the test of proof of concept. Now, to come and invest that humongous money to settle the chain was something that I describe as lifeline. It was a lifeline to half of distributors that were going out of business. It was a lifeline to the local village stations that don't get fuel anymore. It was a lifeline to major mission critical companies in the country, the hospitals that are having intensive units, the airlines, and we need to have 24-hour power in every airport. And then it's also the same for the base station. Me and you were complaining about network. The base stations require petrol to operate. So all of these networks and even our defense, they can't get power, they can't get gas, they can't get crude. They don't know when they will get it. The price at which they get it is exorbitant. So this is a delivery that goes in to ensure that those mission critical industries can have a leap of faith. Then secondly, again, when you are going to compare like with like, who are the beneficiaries of this investment? 230 million Nigerians are going to be benefiting directly from this. And if you divide 1.7 trillion by 230 million, it's about 7,400 naira each human being in the country. If you look at 40 million families, household units in Nigeria, they will be getting 42,000 naira per household. You look at 42 million businesses, it's about 70,000, 40,000 per unit. So it goes beyond the notional value, but on the impact of the overall supply chain, the jobs created, this 10,000 tanks is not just 10,000, it's 10,000 times 6,000 jobs. And then if you look at the working of the company, you are going to say, to what standard is that Dangote company working? It's working to the highest international standard as validated by ILO. It looks after the welfare of people, of the businesses, of the employees. It pays their pension, it pays their insurance, it gives them free medical, it gives them housing allowance. Even as long as you are over 5 years, you can have access to loan. So what is it that you want from a company, a responsible, ethical company, that you are not getting? All you have is a union that is abusing its power, creating monopoly power, raw monopoly power, and then wanting to hold the country to ransom. And the question I'm going to ask is, we'll come back
no, Prof. I was going to raise a point about competition. If they don't get anything, at least they will get their. If they don't get anything, at least they will get their check of dues.
The thing is that their argument is misplaced. First of all, Dangote does not represent a monopoly in the midstream, because NNPC has 4 refineries. It's only got 1 refinery. And then you have 3 modular refineries. And in fact, we issued license for many modular refineries. And many are coming on stream. It doesn't represent a monopoly there. If there's any monopoly, it has always been the NNPC. The second point is this investment necessary? Is he actually in the retail end? The answer is that he's not at the retail end. He has a right to distribute his products to points where the last mile can be. It is his product. It is not taking over. No, it's not his. And who stops? Nobody stops the union from management buyout. Go and buy the refinery of NNPC and run those. Go and take shares. If you are collecting as much as 25 billion naira, which is if you are using 70 million liters, then why are you investing the money? I think the jury should be out on the transparency of where are their accounts? What are they actually doing with those money? What are they investing to the future of the industry? Rather than kill the golden goose. This is actually what it's trying to do, to kill the golden goose. They are not had nothing. And the company says, yes, we recognize the right of workers. But the Constitution also says freedom of association. It has to be voluntary registration, and it's still paying you the 1 naira per liter that you require. So it's not blocking you. But why are you investing that money? What are you doing with your money? And then also you don't rely, because it's actually trying to stop. And then also, I haven't heard Dangote say that your 3,000 trucks cannot come to my country to take fuel. He hasn't said that. I haven't heard that he has said that. And then also you're talking about what can they do? They can still do last mile delivery. Number 2, they can supply fuel for all the others that I imagine as refiners. Also, there are importers. How many millions of liters of fuel have been imported? There have been 200 million. They can still be distributing those. Nobody stops anybody. And then you cannot stop a company that wants to help this country meet our CNG targets and our decarbonization agenda. You can't stop that, because the Tinubu wants to do that, but he didn't have enough money. He has a Marshall Plan for that, but the NNPC trapped 50% of the subsidy. So now a private sector is putting 1.7 trillion to deliver on our economy, and somebody else is just fomenting trouble. I think we need to look. And let me tell you the temptation. They are now asking government. What they are doing, they're actually asking government to prescribe Mupeng and then split it up so that private sector can have theirs, other subsectors can have theirs. Is truck only carrying fuel and gas? Trucks carry chemicals, they carry ethanol, they carry water, and some are active in the oil, some are active in the chemical industry. So they're actually inviting the federal government to prescribe that union and then allow more unions and break it up, because it's now behaving as a monopoly. That is exactly that's what I began by saying. People that live in glass houses don't throw stones. They invite scrutiny. scrutiny of their
Prof.
financials and inviting proscription, which is what Mr. Thatcher did.
So that scrutiny that you talked about, maybe that would be the responsibility of the Registrar of Trade Unions. But you talked about proxy war, that this may be a proxy war. Now, when the Dangote Refinery entered the market, the president of the company, that's Alhaji Aliko Dangote himself, had made the point that a lot of people discourage him. And now that there's this rift with NUPENG, we see that there is a division. On one hand, you have NUPENG supported by the marketers and also supported by Nigeria Labour Congress that is even threatening to go on strike. On the other hand, you have the petroleum tanker drivers, and then you have so who are these people? These proxies, these people who are behind the mafia that is there. Can you identify them? And I have asked the question: why would NSC say it will go on strike? Because of something that I really don't think has reached that level.
In some of my interviews, I questioned the midstream and downstream regulatory agency, because I said that the first task that you should do is to establish the correct consumption of fuel in the country. We here trade 30 million, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, even 90. But we know that when we embarked on to shut down the borders, demand collapsed by about 30 to 35%. And all the countries along the coast up to Senegal were in turmoil. And that was direct evidence of what was going on. And we saw when the EFCC went in to see what was going on, the shenanigans going on there, that it was fraud. Okay, keep that aside. We believe that this would have been an opportunity, the rollout of this 4,000 tons to treat would have been an opportunity for us to even mount satellite tracker, to have a geo fencing, and we can actually establish the correct usage of fuel in the country, only to their own benefit. But you cannot be arguably, involved in some of these things going on, and then you are thinking that you can have your way all the time. When you touch people in their comfort zone, they will fight back. You know, Okonjo-Iweala said, if you fight corruption in the country, corruption will fight back. So put that aside. The second task that I expected the NMPRD to do is to carry out a good mapping of the capacities, of the local capacities, and then appropriately advise the upstream company so that it could come down on the drilling companies and then make sure that local supplies happen before they will do it. And then also to be able to justify any importation of additional fuel. Because if you don't have deficit, why are you importing? And then also subject the import to quality standards, international quality standards. All of these things are not happening. And so what it tells you is that there's a window of corruption that we are using this small screen.
Okay, Prof. There's some noise in the background. I don't know where that is coming from. Hello, who is that chatting in the background? Please, can we concentrate on the program? Sorry about that, Prof. Some chatter, at the background. Now, I was going to ask you, the Ministry of Labor and Employment has intervened. The Department of State Services has intervened, simply from the point of view of the fact that this has to do with security. And the average Nigerian is concerned about the possibility of fuel scarcity, of a strike. How best do you think this can be resolved going forward? Hello, Prof. No, your mic is muted. Prof, your mic.
Okay, I think first of all, yeah, I can hear. I think first of all, NUPENG has to play to the rules. What are the rules of engagement? There have to be clear rules of engagement. There have to be notices, constructive notices. There have to be right to vote. You can't wake up in the morning and say you are going to start. There should be substantial notice, and there should be room for negotiation, and there should be no mandatory thing, arbitrariness And so that is why I describe them as raw monopoly power. And there should be accountability. And there should be transparency. They're not accountable on financial matters. They're not being transparent. So the thing is that we have to make sure that administratively they are playing to the rule and not coercive, obstructive, and precipitate action. And that doesn't help anybody because it raises the specter of insecurity. It also affects our development agenda. It punishes more people. And in fact, it destroys investment. Our problem in our country is that lack of investment. FDI has melted away completely. You could not see FDI give us $2 billion this year, but an individual, a company has put $20 billion. So this question should not be arising. And if that individual or that company is committed to free trade union and support it with everything, we should be more considerate in the way we address that. And I think also some other issues to adopt all other necessary measures to ensure that his business survives. And then, by the way, this is a company that has 700,000 barrel capacity of crude, and you are giving him only 70,000 barrels. Not even 100,000 barrels, not even 200,000 barrels. So what leg do you stand on to demand his head? Where is justice? Where is fairness in our country?
Okay, Prof. We saw a report yesterday that